Hey, welcome to DA Tool Brief 0006. Burger King did something in July that looks simple on the surface. The company gave one person in the restaurant a clearer job. But the operating problem underneath that decision is exactly the kind of thing new leaders miss. Earlier this year, Burger King asked guests across the United States to tell the company where the restaurant experience was breaking down. Thousands of calls and texts came in through its listening initiative. One pattern Burger King said it heard consistently was that guests wanted someone inside the restaurant who could quickly make things right when something went wrong. That is a very specific operating signal. The guest does not necessarily need another policy. They do not necessarily need another screen, another receipt check, another handoff, or another explanation of what the process was supposed to do. Sometimes the process has already failed. The order was not prepared the way the guest asked. A customization was missed. The guest has a question nobody on the front counter feels able to settle. A problem moves between the counter, the kitchen, and whoever happens to be closest. People are working. The restaurant is still open. Orders are still moving. Nothing looks like a major operational collapse. But one guest is now sitting inside a blocker the normal process did not clear. That is the level I want you thinking about here. Not a corporate crisis, not a building evacuation, not some once-in-a-career emergency where everybody already knows senior leadership has to get involved. This is the Tuesday lunch shift. This is the wrong sandwich, the missing customization, the guest who has already explained the issue once, and the team member who does not have enough authority to close the loop. That is where early career leadership actually lives. Burger King's response was to introduce what it calls the Your Way Champion, a reimagined restaurant manager role designed to be a visible point of contact for guests. Burger King says that person welcomes guests, double-checks orders, pays attention to customization, and is available to make things right when needed. The company is also investing in training and restaurant resources to support the role. Look at the decision underneath that. Burger King did not say every team member should become the final authority for every guest problem. It did not say every guest concern should be pushed to the corporate office. It did not say the restaurant manager should leave operations behind and personally perform every task in the building. It created a clearer human control point. When the normal path cannot settle the blocker, the guest should be able to reach someone identifiable who has enough judgment, authority, and operating context to engage it directly. That is a small move, but it is also a serious leadership design decision, because the common failure is not that nobody cares. The common failure is that everybody touches the problem and nobody owns the point that is actually stuck. A crew member hears the complaint. Another person checks the ticket. Someone asks the kitchen. The kitchen says the item was made from what appeared on the screen. The guest explains the customization again. A supervisor is busy on drive-through. Another manager is handling labor. The issue continues moving sideways. The restaurant has activity. It does not have resolution. The exact interaction changes from store to store and guest to guest. But the operating condition Burger King is trying to address is clear. Guests told the company they wanted a person who could quickly make things right. That matters because process only works when the process can reach the decision the problem requires. If the team member already has the authority, information, and skill to correct the issue, let the normal process work. If a remake solves it, remake it. If the receipt answers the question, use the receipt. If the standard service recovery step is enough, use it. But when the blocker becomes judgment, authority, trust, access, or ownership, another repetition of the same process does not become more effective just because more people participate. That is where leadership has to read the problem differently. Think about what Burger King actually heard. Guests did not ask for an additional management layer hidden in the back office. They wanted somebody they could identify, somebody present in the restaurant, somebody able to help while the experience was still happening. The value of the role is not the title. The value is the match between the blocker and the human capability. If the blocker is order accuracy, the person needs enough access to inspect what happened and enough authority to correct the guest experience. If the blocker is customization, the person needs to understand what was requested, what was produced, and what the restaurant can do next. If the blocker is a guest who has already lost confidence in the handoff, the person needs enough credibility and ownership to stop the guest from being passed through another cycle. The manager role becomes useful because the role is closer to the blocker. That does not mean the manager should do everything. That distinction is where weak leaders usually go wrong. The first weak response is process cycling. The leader tells the employee to run the problem through the same channel again, check the ticket again, ask the same person again, send another message, put it back in the queue, wait for the next step. That works when the process is still capable of resolving the issue. It fails when the problem has reached a control point the process does not contain. The second weak response is leader takeover. The new supervisor wants to prove they are useful, so they step into everything. They remake the order, they talk to every guest, they answer every crew question, they fix every schedule issue, they call every vendor, they become the only person allowed to use judgment. That can feel strong for about 2 weeks. Then the leader becomes the bottleneck. The team stops making decisions it should be making. Every exception waits for one person. The manager cannot stay at the level of the whole shift because they are buried inside individual tasks. The original blocker may be gone. The organization has created a new one. Burger King's move is useful because it points toward the middle. The right person engages the blocker. The rest of the operation keeps its ownership. That is the leadership tension. Do you keep pushing the issue through a process that has already reached its limit? Do you take over the entire problem yourself? Or do you identify the specific capability the blocker now requires and put the right person on that point? Ask yourself a few questions before I name the tool. What is actually stuck? Is the current process capable of resolving it? What authority, judgment, trust, access, or skill is missing? Who has that capability? What exactly do they need to handle? And once that point is cleared, can the work return to the normal path? The direct action tool for that condition is manual engagement. Manual engagement is a skilled hands-on strategy used when a blocker inside the problem cannot be resolved by process, delay, stabilization, intervention, or redirection, and must be handled directly by the person with the judgment, authority, trust, access, or technical ability to address it. The use line is simple. Put the right hands on the blocker, then return to the lowest risk path. Manual engagement is not micromanagement. It is not the leader taking over. It is not rank replacing competence. It is not the loudest person entering the problem. And it is not an excuse to bypass a process that is still working. Manual engagement fits when the process has reached a blocker that requires human capability. And that capability may be authority. A team member knows what should happen, but only a supervisor can approve the exception. It may be judgment. The facts are available, but the situation does not fit cleanly inside a standard rule. It may be trust. A guest, employee, customer, vendor, patient, resident, or stakeholder has stopped accepting another handoff and needs the person who actually owns the relationship. It may be technical skill. The problem has moved beyond what a generalist should touch. It may be access. The right answer is known, but only one role can reach the system, record, equipment, decision point, or person required to move it. The leader's job is to match the blocker to the capability, not the blocker to whoever is standing nearby. That difference matters. A first-line supervisor does not prove leadership by personally touching more work. They prove leadership by putting the correct capability where the operation needs it. Sometimes that will be them, sometimes it should not be. If the guest issue requires manager authority, step in. If the equipment fault requires maintenance, call maintenance. If the employee question belongs to human resources or payroll, do not invent an answer because you're wearing the manager's shirt. If the customer relationship depends on the account owner, use the account owner. If the technical decision belongs to quality, engineering, or information technology, put the decision where the competence sits. Manual engagement starts with humility about the blocker. What does this problem actually require? That is why Burger King's Your Way Champion is a useful current example. The company is not calling the role manual engagement. That is my operating translation. Burger King heard that guests wanted a person in the restaurant who could quickly make things right. The company responded by making the restaurant manager role more visible and more directly tied to guest interaction, order accuracy, customization, and real-time problem resolution. The move acknowledges something basic. Not every service failure needs more process. Some need a person who can close the gap, but there is a boundary. The role should not become the place where every routine decision goes to die. If every missing napkin, every standard remake, every basic crew question, and every normal transaction requires the champion, then the role is not empowering the restaurant, it is centralizing it. Manual engagement should be selective. The blocker needs a capability the normal path does not currently provide. The right person handles that blocker. The engagement stays inside a defined scope. Then the work goes back, that is the handoff leaders forget. They step in correctly and stay too long. The guest concern is settled, but now the manager is personally running the order. The employee issue is clarified, but now the supervisor owns every follow-up. The technical specialist identifies the fault, but operations leaves the equipment decision permanently attached to that person. Manual engagement is complete when the blocker is cleared and the path is returned. Recognition signals are practical. The same issue keeps moving through the same process without resolution. The team is waiting for somebody with authority. A relationship is deteriorating because the person with trust is not engaged. Generalists are discussing a technical problem they should not decide. The leader is being pulled toward full takeover when only one blocker actually requires their involvement. Those signals tell you to inspect the human capability, not automatically add another process step. That recognition level is where I want to keep this public tool brief. The full match method goes deeper into identifying the blocker, determining the required capability, assigning the right person, controlling the engagement boundary, and handing the work back to the lowest risk path. For now, keep the principle. Put the right hands on the blocker, then get the rest of the operation moving again. Now move the same pattern into healthcare. A clinic access supervisor is managing a referral queue. Most referrals move through the normal process. Scheduling receives the request, verifies required information, routes it to the appropriate specialty, and contacts the patient when the next step is ready. Then one referral stops moving. The scheduling team sends it back because one required element is unclear. The originating office resubmits the same material. It returns again. The patient calls for an update. A scheduler explains that the referral is still under review but cannot answer what the specialty actually needs changed. The temptation is to keep routing because that is the process, but the process is cycling because the blocker is no longer administrative. The question now requires someone who understands the referral requirement well enough to clarify what is actually missing and what the next safe handoff should be. That may be a nurse lead, referral coordinator, provider support lead, or another role with the right clinical operations judgment. Manual engagement does not mean the supervisor takes over the patient's care. It means the leader recognizes that the scheduler has reached the edge of their authority and expertise. The right person engages the specific blocker, clarifies the requirement, and returns the referral to the access path. If leadership refuses that targeted engagement, schedulers keep cycling paperwork. The patient keeps calling. Staff workload increases. Provider frustration grows. And leadership may eventually blame the scheduling team for a decision the team never had the authority or expertise to make. That is not accountability. That is bad control. Ask the same questions. What is stuck? What capability is missing? Who actually owns that capability? What is the narrowest engagement needed? And once the blocker is cleared, can scheduling resume ownership? Now move it into manufacturing. A new production supervisor is responsible for a line that keeps stopping on an intermittent equipment fault. Operators reset the machine according to the approved procedure. The line restarts. 20 minutes later, the fault returns. The supervisor checks the production board, reviews the downtime code, and asks the operators what changed. Nothing obvious appears. The dangerous early career move is to start troubleshooting beyond competence because production is waiting. The supervisor wants movement. The team is looking at them. The schedule is slipping. That pressure can make a title feel like technical expertise. It is not. If the fault is moved beyond the operator reset and the approved first-line checks, the blocker may now require the maintenance technician or control specialist who understands the machine. Manual engagement means bringing that capability directly to the fault, not putting 12 people around the machine, not holding a 30-minute meeting about why the machine is inconvenient, not asking an operator to keep resetting equipment that is telling you the condition has changed, and not having the production supervisor start changing technical settings they are not authorized or qualified to change. The specialist engages the fault. Production defines the impact. The supervisor protects the line, labor, and schedule around that engagement. Once the technical blocker is handled, ownership returns to normal production and maintenance control. If one specialist has to personally rescue the same machine every week, then the organization has another problem to examine. But that does not change the immediate read. The current blocker requires the right technical hands. Now put it into public sector service. A resident comes to a city service counter because an application has stopped moving. The customer service representative can see the status. They can see which review is incomplete. They can explain the normal process. But the resident has already followed the instructions and the same issue has returned twice. The frontline employee sends another message to the reviewing unit. The resident hears another version of, "Someone will get back to you." That may be the exact point where process has stopped being the answer. The customer service employee does not have the authority to interpret the disputed requirement. The resident does not need the employee to guess. They need the person who owns the decision point. That might be a permit supervisor, program manager, inspector, reviewer, or department liaison depending on the issue. Manual engagement means putting that person on the blocker with a defined scope. Clarify the requirement. Resolve the decision point that normal routing cannot settle. Document the result. Then return the application to the standard process. The wrong move is to force the frontline employee to keep absorbing frustration for a decision they cannot make. The other wrong move is to have a department director personally own every complicated application. Again, the match matters. Who has the authority, judgment, and process knowledge required for this blocker? Use that person. Then hand the work back. Now take it into logistics. A distribution center has a priority outbound load staged near the dock, but the carrier's driver says the seal number on the release paperwork does not match the seal physically assigned to the trailer. The shipping clerk checks the paperwork. The warehouse management system shows the load is ready. The dock team says the trailer was staged correctly. The driver will not pull the load until the discrepancy is resolved. At that point, telling the clerk to print the same paperwork again does not solve anything. The blocker requires somebody who can verify the inventory and shipping record, inspect the physical control point, and decide what correction is authorized. That may be the inventory control lead, shipping supervisor, or another role with the right access and authority. The point is not to create a dockside committee. The point is to put the right person on the mismatch. If the load is correct and the paperwork is wrong, correct the record through the approved process. If the physical seal or trailer is wrong, stop the release and fix the actual condition. If the evidence is insufficient, do not pressure the driver to move because the customer window is closing. Manual engagement protects the decision by matching the blocker to the person capable of resolving it. Then the load goes back to the normal shipping path. The industry's changed. The pattern did not. Burger King heard guests asking for someone in the restaurant who could quickly make things right. The clinic scheduler reaches a referral question beyond scheduling authority. The production supervisor reaches a machine fault beyond first-line technical competence. The public service employee reaches a decision point they cannot interpret. The shipping clerk reaches a release discrepancy that requires control authority. In every case, the normal path worked until it reached a blocker. The blocker required something the path did not contain: authority, judgment, trust, technical skill, or access. The tool is the point. The situation is the proof. Manual engagement becomes weak when leaders overuse it. If you step into everything, you are not applying the tool. You are building dependency. If you send every problem upward, you are not matching capability. You are abandoning your own level of responsibility. If you bring in a specialist when the standard process could have handled the issue, you waste scarce expertise and teach the team not to solve routine problems. If you keep the specialist or manager attached after the blocker is cleared, you turn targeted engagement into permanent ownership. The operating discipline is narrower. Use the normal path when the normal path can work. When it cannot, identify why. If the missing control is human capability, put the right person on the blocker. Give them the scope needed to clear that point. Then return the work to the lowest risk, suitable path. That is why this tool matters so much for leaders in their first 0 to 2 years. Your first instinct will often be to prove that you can solve the problem. That is understandable. But leadership is not a contest to see how much work you can personally absorb. Your job is to protect the objective. Sometimes the best way to do that is to act yourself. Sometimes the best way is to stop acting and put somebody better matched on the point that is stuck. Before we close, look at one blocker already sitting inside your operation. What is actually stuck? What process has already been tried? What capability is missing? Is it authority, judgment, trust, access, or technical skill? Who has that capability? What exactly do they need to handle? What should remain outside their scope? And once they clear that blocker, where does the work go back? The accountability tension is simple. Are you keeping the issue inside a process that cannot resolve it because asking the right person to engage feels like escalation? Or are you taking over work that belongs to somebody else because being needed feels like leadership? Manual engagement rejects both. Put the right hands on the blocker, clear the point that process cannot move, then hand the work back. This has been DA Tool Brief 0006, Manual Engagement. Burger King's Your Way Champion Initiative gives us a current restaurant floor example of the operating principle. A visible restaurant leader is being positioned as a point of contact when guests need somebody who can help make the experience right. The initiative is new, so I'm not claiming it has already produced a measured performance outcome. What is documented is the problem Burger King says it heard, the role it created in response, and the responsibilities it assigned to that role. What we do not know yet is whether the operating reality will match the design. We do not know whether every restaurant will staff the role consistently, whether champions will receive enough authority to actually close guest issues, whether the training will hold under lunch rush pressure, or whether the role will become another title sitting on top of the same old process. We also do not know whether frontline teams will understand when to pull the champion in, when to solve the problem themselves, and when the issue belongs somewhere else entirely. Those are execution questions, and the announcement cannot answer them. Time will tell whether manual engagement was truly the right operating response, or whether the idea was stronger in the briefing room than it became on the restaurant floor. A tool can fit the problem perfectly and still fail in execution. The right person can be named, trained, and positioned, but if that person has no usable authority, no clear scope, no support during peak volume, or no expectation to hand the work back after the blocker is cleared, the organization has not created manual engagement. It has created another handoff with a better title. And that is where leadership ownership becomes the real test. A restaurant leader can treat the Your Way champion role as an operating responsibility, stay visible, understand the guest path, step into the blockers that actually require judgment or authority, and then return control to the team. Or they can wear the title, disappear into the office, let complaints keep circulating, and shrug when the new initiative produces the same old outcome. That difference will not be decided by the press release. It will be decided shift by shift. If leaders take ownership, the role may become a real human control point inside the restaurant. If they become complacent, sloppy, or treat the initiative like another corporate program that somebody else owns, the title will survive longer than the behavior. That is the unresolved part of this case, and it is exactly why the example matters. The concept may be right. The structure may be right. The training may even be right. Execution will decide whether the tool actually shows up when the blocker appears. Across the next direct action briefings, we will move manual engagement into other operating environments and keep testing the same distinction. When you're ready to move from recognizing a human capability blocker to building the full capability match, scope, authority limit, expected output, and return path, the complete manual engagement method is taught inside the direct action training. Until then, keep one question in front of you. What blocker are you still pushing through a process that cannot resolve it when the right person could clear the point and hand the work back?